Could you please pick up from where you left so that you can complete your thought?
Yeah, as quickly as possible. I just say that in order for us to understand the role and place of the Voice of America in the world today, we have to go back in time. I was just saying from 1940, when it came into being, you had the war against the communists and the fascists simultaneously. America had to project herself globally. So, of course, it became the Voice of America in the narrative. So, at that time, we are fighting the communists. We have to be propagandistic to make sure that our supporters are not lured by the communists on the one hand or the fascists on the other. So, you have to get America's message right there. So, America wanted to win against the fascists and the communists. So, you have to tell it like it is. So, that was precisely the narrative. Then, you have the independent countries. The African countries and Asian countries were just about to become independent. They were being exposed to all these narratives. The Voice of America became one of the voices, one of the big loudspeakers. So you have the Bandung Conference, you had Nehru from India, Kwame Nkrumah from Nasser from Egypt. All those people came around. Nasser was very much aware of the Soviet propaganda and the American narrative coming out, American propaganda for the Egyptians on the Nasser.
When you talk about Nasser, Kwame Nkrumah and what have you, you're talking about the non-aligned movement?
Yeah, the non-aligned movement came out of that narrative. That was one of the reasons why they had the Bandung Conference. The people who founded Bandung would later create the non-aligned. They don't want to be East or West. So when it comes to broadcasting, they were listening to the Americans and to the Soviets. So that was the narrative you were dealing with. The British were there, the French were there, the Germans were there. What I'm trying to say is, if you look at the Voice of America today, you have to look at the history from 1940 right through World War II, right through the Bandung Conference. Then Nasser created the Voice of the Arabs, which was an Arab counter voice to Voice of America, BBC, Radio France, etc. So you have that kind of narrative. Kwame Nkrumah didn't have a global broadcasting system, but Ghanaians and other Africans were affected. She had the Voice of Africa in terms of newspapers, but not a radio station. So when you talk about Voice of America today, it has gone through some radical changes. During the Cold War, when the African countries were now independent, the Voice of America played a very important role of educating Africans about America. And this is one of the reasons why the Peace Corps of John Kennedy came out of that narrative. American anthropologists, American businessmen, American politicians, American scholars became more and more involved in African affairs. The Voice of America played a very important role in giving voice to the American mind in African soil and elsewhere. And this is what we are dealing with today. So in conclusion, what I would say, the Voice of America today, after the Cold War in '89, is a different kid.
So given that a lot of people tend to associate propaganda with something particularly negative, what is your definition, if you were to talk to us in a layman's or a layperson's language, what is your definition of propaganda? Because in fact, a lot of times it is a positive thing.
Well, propaganda really is a term that is used by the politicians when they were fighting each other. But I think if you look at words, and I think the Charter, well, that's one of the reasons why you have to recognize the fact that the Voice of America operates in a different way. Because you see, in the Anglo-Saxon tradition, you do have different estates. The media constitute another estate. So they enjoy some rights to criticize policymakers, and they allow people to express themselves. That's one reason why I'm here as a scholar. I have to be able to communicate with Americans and the rest of the world so that they know what Nyang is saying is correct. I cannot say lies here because people are listening to me. They listen to what we're saying here. So the propagandist would be someone who will be trying to promote an idea, to promote a political idea or political group or political opponent movement. But that's not the intention. The intention of the scholar is to research, find about what's going on in Africa, and share your finding with policymakers, with religious leaders. I'm very active in the religious groups. That's one of the reasons why I am very concerned about Voice of America reflecting accurate information about what's happening in the continent with regard to how groups are treated. Social justice is part of the narrative, and Voice of America should be the voice of people who are dealing with social justice, democracy, and works against dictatorship, in my opinion.